Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliette Mann.
And I'm Sally Baudet. Our top stories. President Xi Jinping wraps up his state visit to France with a trip to the Pyrenees on the invitation of Emmanuel Macron.
The visit comes as data shows French investment in China jumped nearly 600% year-on-year in the first 2 months of 2024.
Israel sends a new delegation to Cairo, saying a Hamas-backed ceasefire plan falls short of its core demands.
After years of losses, Disney's streaming division turns a profit, beating Wall Street's expectations.
And an ancient technique brought back to life, the artist reviving a lost craft from the days of the Tang dynasty.
Xi Jinping has wrapped up his visit to France with a trip to the Pyrenees Mountains in the country's southwest.
China's president and his wife, Peng Liyuan, were welcomed at the airport by Emmanuel Macron and his wife, Brigitte. President Macron is a regular visitor to the region, having spent time there with his grandmother when he was a child. The trip comes a day after the two leaders signed a number of agreements in Paris. Our correspondent Ken Brown is in Paris and joins us now. Hello, Ken. So, where is President Xi currently?
Yeah, hi Sally. Well, we've just heard that about a half an hour ago the two presidents have begun the journey back down the mountains. They're on their way to Tarbes Airport, where President Xi will take a plane to his next stop on Serbia. Now, we've seen the visit here in Tarbes Mountain in the Pyrenees, a very personal visit, as you mentioned, part of the world that's really sort of woven into the fabric of Macron's family. His grandmother grew up in Bagnères de Bigorre, a town that they should be passing about now, actually. President Macron visits quite frequently. They visited the La Mongie ski station, apparently having lunch up there. On the menu was Porc Noir de Bigorre, the speciality of the region, which is a sort of a pork soup dish from the native black pig. Blueberry pie on the dessert menu, apparently, if we're to believe some of our French other journalists that we've been speaking to. So right now they're making their way down the Col de Tourmalet, one of the highest paved paths up in the Pyrenees. We were lucky to visit La Mongie ski station last week. It's a really beautiful place, some stunning views, still snow covered up there, a vibrant ski spot during the season. Right now it's a lot more quiet, obviously out of season, so I'm sure President Xi has had a chance to take in some of those beautiful views up there. This, of course, a response by President Macron to when President Xi took him on a very personal trip last year in April 2023 in the province of Guangdong. They visited the residence of the governor of the province of Guangdong, where President Xi's own father stayed for a while. They had a tea ceremony there. So another very personal trip for both of these leaders to speak a little bit more informally, perhaps, after the very heavy diplomatic schedule yesterday.
Yeah, so quite an emotional end to this visit to France. Talk to me about what has been achieved in terms of trade ties, diplomatically even.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yesterday we had a lot of, we saw press conferences, joint press statements, statements being released by Ursula von der Leyen, by Emmanuel Macron, on the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs site as well. So I think in terms of concrete things that have been achieved, I feel like all sides will feel like they have really expressed themselves well. We heard from insiders in the Élysée Palace today that they felt that President Xi listened in terms of trade. Europe and China both say that they want to avoid any sort of sanctions, an escalation of sanctions that could lead to a trade war. Elsewhere, 18 agreements were signed, very concrete things there, lots of projects involving energy, green development, industry, technology. They talked about artificial intelligence also. We saw agreements with French energy company EDF and nuclear energy, something that China and France have been working together for a long time. So a lot of concrete proposals, things that you can point to. Also a lot of common ground on a desire for peace in the conflicts in the Ukraine and in the Middle East. And both sides have talked about how they want to see a truce during the Olympics coming up here in Paris in a couple of months.
All right, thank you very much for that update. Our correspondent in Paris, Ken Brown.
Martin Jacques is the author of the global bestseller, When China Rules the World, and he joins us now. Good to see you, Martin. Now, as our correspondent Ken was saying, President Macron seemed to place a really big emphasis on the personal touch on this state visit of Xi Jinping, taking him to his favourite holiday destination in the Pyrenees. What do you think this tells us about the relationship between the two men?
Well, I think they both are anxious to get on well together and to have some kind of ongoing relationship which will help, hopefully, both to influence, to exercise greater influence. Look, as I understand it, although your correspondent, I don't think, mentioned it, President Xi invited Macron to come to Beijing again. It's not long since he was there.
Well, much of the focus of discussions has been around trade. President Xi reiterated that China wants more investment from French firms, and Macron called for fair rules for foreign companies in China. Did they both get what they wanted?
Oh, well, it's difficult to say from what's been said so far. I think that they had enough on each other's agenda to press for and to get some results, and we'll see as time goes by exactly what those results will be. But I mean, it's interesting that French investment in the last couple of months has greatly increased towards China, and I think that there's a lot of other questions that are at stake here, like the question of electric vehicles in Europe, particularly obviously Chinese EVs. But I think it sounds as if it's gone reasonably well. Who knows?
Did you get the sense that Macron was maybe courting more Chinese investment into the EV sector in France?
Well, I think that this is my guess. The long-run solution to European unease about the huge competitiveness of Chinese electric vehicles will be firms like BYD establishing plants in Europe, and I think that's in the longer run likely to be what happens, just like the Japanese and the Koreans did.
Now, something else they talked about was global stability, and President Xi said that the world we live in is far from tranquil, and that China and France should work together to promote peace. What's your take?
Well, I think that one of the things that the Chinese like about Macron is his relatively independent spirit. Of course, there's been quite a long French tradition of this, but the fact that he emphasizes strategic autonomy by Europe, he says, you know, he's basically not going to do America's bidding. He's not going to be a vassal. I think the words were vassal of the United States. He said we're not going to get involved in Taiwan and so on. So he has actually been carving out quite an interesting position in the context of Europe, and indeed in the context of relations with the United States. And I think that is quite good ground for cooperation between the two countries.
Of course, France was just the first stop on this European tour. President Xi is now going to head to Serbia and then on to Hungary. What can we expect from those legs of this trip?
Well, their relations are very different. I mean, if you like, France is the heartland, or part of the heartland of Europe, whereas these two countries are, are Central Europe, Eastern Europe. And they've got the background is very different. I mean, in the case of Serbia, he'll arrive on the 25th anniversary of the American bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, which still rankles with the Chinese for understandable reasons. They lost 3 people, 20 were injured, and they've never accepted, really, that it was an accident by the Americans. So I think that he'll find a big, warm welcome in Serbia, because Serbia is not part of the European Union. It feels, a bit isolated and excluded. And China, they treat as a friend. Chinese investment is very heavy in Serbia. The trading relationship is strong. There was a big Chinese flag flying in central Belgrade today. So I think basically the Serbians look on China as a real friend. Hungary is different. I mean, whereas Serbia is not in the European Union and it's not in NATO, Hungary is in both. But Hungary is a truant, as it were, political truant in both of them, in that it seeks to take a rather independent position, which I think, in the context of present situation globally and within Europe, rather appeals to the Chinese.
It's going to be an exciting week, isn't it? Martin Jacques, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's 60 years since China and France established diplomatic relations. And in recent decades, China has been taking steps to open its financial sector to the world.
French investment into China jumped nearly 6-fold in the first 2 months of 2024 compared to the previous year. Our correspondent Aaron Liu reports.
On April 15th, the China Securities Regulatory Commission approved the establishment of BNP Paribas Securities China Limited, a subsidiary fully owned by BNP Paribas. This move underscores the deepening and expanding Sino-French economic and trade cooperation, which continues to open up new areas of collaboration.
When you look back for the last 60 years, the French companies, the multinational company in China, have participated in numerous of the building up of the local economy, okay? And France also has a very strong industrial policy and is also a very big trading nation in the world. So I think in this many of the regard, we share a common value and a background in trying to promote the real economy.
According to the Ministry of Commerce, French FDI in China expanded by 585.8% year-on-year in January and February, a telling sign of the effectiveness of China's efforts to improve its business environment and the continued optimism that French firms have about the Chinese market. Looking forward, Lai also shared his thoughts on opportunities for BNP as the country's capital markets continue to evolve.
I think the country has been trying to opening up the financial market in a measured way. I mean, this is critical because we are taking in a lot of the lessons we learned in the other parts of the world. The Chinese has done many of the opening up, but what is important is we need to maximize and leverage to see where we can calibrating some of the opening to achieve the best results.
Meanwhile, the largest asset management company in Europe, French company Amundi, has set up several joint ventures with Chinese partners over the years and has been in China for quite a long time.
We always had a good dialogue with our partners first, and also with the regulators. That's very important. So I always found regulators which are competent, so understanding what we do, available to discuss, quite a friendly environment. In our industry, the landscape is evolving, the regulation is evolving as well, the habits of the clients are also evolving.
It is worth noting that with the continuous growth of China's economy and the internationalization of the RMB, more and more international investors want to participate in the Chinese market. Foreign securities firms have become a bridge connecting domestic and foreign high-quality assets and investors, and promoting the international development of the capital market. Aaron Liu, CGTN.
The French multinational Michelin Group has long been committed to enhancing mobility, not only by making tyres, but also with its renowned Michelin travel guides.
Florent Menegaux, its president and CEO of Michelin, spoke to CGTN's Trent Murray about the company's global reach and its expanding relationship with China.
Michelin has been operating now for the past 134 years. All over the world. We are present in 175 countries around the world, and we have we employ 135,000 people, and we are growing nicely everywhere.
In 1988, Michelin establishes a sales office in Hong Kong. The next year it moves to mainland China. 35 years you've had a presence in China now. When you reflect on that 3.5 decades, what are some of the highlights for you as a company?
So first is we have welcomed the opening of China, and that's why we moved in this country as soon as we could, basically. And since then we have developed very nicely in China. Now we operate, we have more than 6,000 employees in China. We have 2 plants. One of our major plants in the world is in China. In Shenyang, in the north part of China, but we have also a plant in Shanghai. We have also a research and development facility, plus our headquarters in China. So really China is an important country for us now.
We spoke about tyres. I suppose some might say that's kind of the bread and butter of the business, but many people would know Michelin for something else. That is, of course, the Michelin Guide, food, gastronomy, another part of your business. I mean, just talk us through, I suppose, the Chinese aspect of that as well, if you could. I mean, you have many Chinese restaurants in the Michelin Guide.
So we launched the first guide in 1900. And the purpose at that time was just to help people move around and discover new space, etc. And of course, China now has established as a... there are not many food culture around the world, and China is one of them. So of course there are plenty of new things to discover in China. Now we started by a guide helping customers, food customers, to select restaurants in Beijing and in Shanghai. And now we have developed more cities, and we have plans to expand even further.
Not just in China, but I think internationally, and you would be aware of this. When people think of Michelin star dining, they might imagine, well, one must have to have very deep pockets to afford Michelin star food. Is that true? I mean, is someone on, say, a student budget, can they also enjoy good food from a Michelin star venue?
Yes, I know, for example, we have started a very small shop in a metro station in Singapore that was providing excellent food, and they had 1 star. So it's not because it's expensive. What we judge is the quality of the food, and that's it. And it doesn't have to be expensive.
Florent Menegaux, thank you for speaking with CGTN.
It was a pleasure.
You are watching CGTN. Still to come, Serbia awaits the arrival of China's president, the next stop on his European tour.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen, so it's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. China's President Xi Jinping will now head to Serbia, the next stop, the second stop of his European tour. Our correspondent Li Chuanhua is in Belgrade. Great to see you, Li Chuanhua. Now, ahead of his arrival, President Xi published an article in a Serbian national newspaper. Can you give us a little bit of detail about what that article contained?
Yeah, Juliet, you are right. But before that, in the background, as you can see, that the Chinese residents in Serbia have already gathered here to welcome President Xi Jinping and the Chinese delegation's arrival. And behind me, you can see that tinge of red. I'm not sure if you can see that clearly, but definitely a lot of Chinese flags and Serbian flags. And the streets of Belgrade, the capital city of Serbia, have been adorned with Chinese and Serbian flags already. And this place behind me, that's the place where the Chinese delegation will drive past. So that is why the Chinese residents in Serbia are gathering here. And about that article that was published on the national newspaper called Politica, Chinese President Xi Jinping highlighted the friendship, the long-standing friendship between China and Serbia. We know that the two countries' relationship can trace back to the 1950s with the former Yugoslavia, between China and former Yugoslavia. And I'm quoting President Xi Jinping's article. So he said, regardless of the changes in the international situation, our ironclad friendship is strengthening, setting an example for cooperation between states. And also, Juliet, trade will be on top of the agenda. We know that the bilateral trade volume has surpassed $4 billion US. But in 2016, last time when President Xi Jinping was here, it was only around $600 million US. And now China was the largest source of foreign investment in the country last year, according to the article, and Serbia's second largest trading partner, second only to the European Union. And before the arrival of the Chinese delegation and the Chinese president, a nice gesture from China, we have just learned that the risk alert warning on bird flu in Serbia has been lifted by China. And also China's president said that China is opposed to external interference. And a few days ago, I talked to the Chinese ambassador Li Ming to Serbia, who said the upcoming visit of the Chinese president will further enhance bilateral relations.
This is a milestone visit, and 8 years ago, President Xi Jinping paid the first state visit to the Republic of Serbia, and that visit has created fruitful outcomes. China and Serbia relations has developed exponentially in the past 8 years. For example, in the year of 2016, our bilateral trade volume was less than $600 million US. But 8 years later, in the year of 2023, China-Serbia bilateral trade volume has reached more than $6 billion US.
As you said, the trade ties between the two countries have increased exponentially. So in what ways do you think the upcoming visit could further enhance the trade ties between the two countries, and in what specific areas?
Yes. Talking about this bilateral trade cooperation, I think we have to mention in the year of 2023, President Alexander Vučić attended the third high-level forum of Belt and Road Initiative in Beijing. On the sidelines of that forum, China and Serbia signed bilateral free trade agreement. Serbian products, for example, Serbian wine, beef, pork and other fruit products, dairy products, will also find opportunities in the huge market of China. China and Serbia cooperation has become a role model. So I believe under the leadership of our leaders, through this visit, we can find an even brighter future of cooperation in areas of trade, investment, infrastructure.
The China-Serbia relationship has been labelled as ironclad. So what makes the bilateral relationship so special?
China-Serbian relations is deeply rooted in historic and cultural history. If like middle-aged or senior people in China, we can always remember the movies and the literature in former Yugoslavia. So many Chinese visitors and tourists come to Serbia to look for their fond memories of our two countries. That has established a very deep and solid foundation for our friendship in the area of culture and the people-to-people links.
Days ago, President Xi Jinping sent a letter to the staff of Smederevo Steel Mill. So how is this received?
Yes, thank you for mentioning the handing over of the letter. I remember vividly when we received the letter, I immediately went to Smederevo factory. And when I presented the letter to the representatives of the workers, some of them, they still remember vividly the day 8 years ago when they welcomed warmly President Xi's visit.
And that was our correspondent, Nitran Hua, reporting from Belgrade.
Well, Marko Albanovic is acting editor-in-chief of the Serbian newspaper Politika, which published President Xi's article. He says he hopes the visit will lead to more cooperation between the two countries.
Politika is a brand older than all of us in this building, older than all the living citizens in Serbia. It is a Serbian institution, recognisable internationally too. The feeling of having this article in our newspaper is fantastic. Prestige and a feeling of great trust from the Chinese embassy. This is not the first time that this Politika has published an author's article by the Chinese president. A similar thing happened in 2016. But this one is the year of the Jubilee. It's 120 years since Politika was established. Therefore, this is a great honour. I expect to deepen the existing friendships between the Serbian and Chinese people, which was strengthened during the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, I expect the economic impact of the visit, as the Expo 2027 is approaching, as well as the things related to the Belt and Road Initiative.
Swiss banking giant UBS has returned to profit for the first time since its takeover of Credit Suisse last year. UBS said net income was $1.8 billion in the first quarter, triple what analysts had forecast. Its wealth management business attracted $27 billion in new net assets over the same period. Shares in UBS are now up over 50% since its merger with its debt-ridden rival in June.
Shares in BP have dropped after first quarter earnings fell 40%, down to $2.7 billion. The oil giant blamed lower energy prices and problems at a refinery in the US state of Indiana. Its new chief executive, Murray Auchincloss, has promised to deliver $2 billion of cost savings by the end of 2026.
British tech startup Wave is set to receive more than $1 billion in funding. SoftBank is leading the latest round of investment in the company, which develops self-learning systems for driverless vehicles. Chipmaker Nvidia and Microsoft are among the other backers of Wave. It's the largest ever financing of a European AI startup.
Fans of the Nintendo Switch gaming console will have to wait a bit longer for its successor, the Switch 2. The company says there will be an announcement before next March, but they're not saying if it's for the product's actual release. The Switch has sold more than 140 million units worldwide since it was launched in 2017.
Disney shares are down. That's despite a surprise profit in its streaming entertainment division.
The company saw a drop in its traditional TV business and weaker box office sales. Our correspondent John Terrett joins us from New York. John, hello. So Disney beat expectations, but still not quite a fairy tale story.
No, you're absolutely right. I've got to just change the subject, though. We agreed this with the producer just now because we've got breaking news here. TikTok is suing the United States government for that potential ban that comes up in a year's time. They're saying that the ban, if it happens, will be a violation of the First Amendment. So this is breaking news. It's just happening here. So TikTok doing what they said they would do, turning to the U.S. courts in order to try and fight this ban that was cleared by the House and the Senate a couple of weeks ago. So that's just in. But as for Disney, no, you're quite right. I mean, Disney's just turned in its fourth quarterly profit in a row. Very good indeed. However, the stock is sharply down today, and I will try to tell you why. You have to understand Disney is a behemoth of a business. We could literally spend the rest of the program talking about Disney only. Now, don't worry, we're not going to do that. Okay. First of all, on the good side, the losses at the streaming division, that's Disney Plus and other streaming services, were pretty much eradicated. They came in at even Stevens, whereas they lost $600 million last time round. So that's very good. There's a slightly bigger loss if you add in ESPN, which is the sporting network here, which they're trying to move from cable to streaming only. Also, some subscribers for streaming fell short of Wall Street expectations. So that's actually not very good. Wall Street is also concerned about how Disney is going to make a profit in streaming, and mainly only from streaming rather than cable going forward, bearing in mind that Netflix is ahead of them and already doing everything now today that Disney wants to do in the future, including folding in AI to the delivery of these streaming services. Now, the ticket prices at the parks help to boost the profits this time round because they put the prices up so much, but there's a danger that they're making it too cost prohibitive for families to go to Florida now. It costs you a fortune to go there right now, and there's worry that they won't be able to put their prices up any further than they are now. Now, the parks are 70% of Disney's business, and Wall Street was looking for growth of about 12% in the parks, and Disney said today that the growth will be pretty much zero. So that's not really very good. They're also investing billions of dollars over the next 5 years or so in perking up the parks. The guidance for the company overall was raised, however. But then we come to linear TV, which is ABC and ESPN, fading away slowly. It's a sore spot for the company. And what's happening is that advertisers who once appeared only on cable and on ABC, the big network, are now preferring to put their adverts on people's podcasts and on streaming services. So Wall Street worries that Disney will have a tough time managing this transition, which is happening to all of us, from streaming sort of linear TV to stuff that will eventually only be online in some form. Finally, Disney saying this morning that it sees great growth potential in Asia, including China. And Bob Iger, who's the boss, who has to stand aside in the next 2 years, said they've identified 4 internal candidates to take over from him, but they're not saying yet who they are. Put that all together, and until yesterday, Disney shares were up by about 29% for the year so far. But now, because of these mixed results, I mean, really not bad results, actually, but with big question marks in, as I hope I've illustrated, the share price is now down by a pretty significant for Disney, 10%, and it is leading. It's the worst performer on the Dow right now, which is an unusual position for them.
Interesting times for Disney, and big news there on TikTok planning to fight back. John, Boeing is back in the news. Tell us why.
Yes, I mean, this is what we do when we talk about Boeing. That's what we do. I mean, I don't know what to say about Boeing. It's a mess. How the heck have they got themselves into this mess? I mean, there are 2 stories today. One is the Starliner, which is the capsule that sits on top of the rocket, which is called the Atlas V. They're sending 2 people up into space. One's called Barry Wilmore, the other one is Sunita Williams, both ex-Navy. And they tried to launch last night, and they couldn't launch because there's a problem with a valve, not with the Starliner capsule, which Boeing has developed, but with the Atlas rocket that takes it up. There's a valve that was flapping around like this. It was open, it was shut, it was open and shut, open and shut, and they could hear it in the control room down on the 2nd floor. So the engineers at NASA and Boeing are looking at that now to see whether they can live with that for tonight or whether they have to replace it. They're going to try and launch the Starliner again tonight. The Starliner is intended to go to the International Space Station. So that's one problem. And the other one, more serious really, is that once again Boeing is the target of a federal Federal Aviation Administration probe, this time into the 787 Dreamliner, the plastic plane. This is after Boeing told the authorities here, they admitted it, they self-admitted the fact that they might not have carried out the safety checks on the plane that they should have done, and therefore there probably should be some kind of inquiry, and now there is. And so I don't know really what to say about that, really. It seems to me it involves the linking bit between the wings and the fuselage and something to do with lightning conductors on the aircraft. Well, it all sounds very serious to me. However, nobody in aviation is panicking. There's no sort of ban on 787s or anything like that. But Boeing shares, of course, are down this morning, and like Disney, Boeing is a Dow Jones component.
Thank you so much. John Terrett in New York there.
You can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, we're live on the border between Israel and Gaza as Israeli troops seize the Rafah crossing.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Burdett and me, Juliet Mann. The headlines again. President Xi Jinping wraps up his state visit to France with a trip to the Pyrenees on the invitation of Emmanuel Macron.
And data shows French investment in China jumped nearly 600% year-on-year in the first 2 months of 2024.
Israeli troops have now taken control of the Rafah crossing into Gaza, sealing the border.
Footage released by the Israeli military shows tanks crossing the border while troops raise the Israeli flag in a nearby park. The IDF has described it as a limited operation to kill Hamas fighters and dismantle the group's infrastructure. But aid agencies say Gaza is now choked off from aid, while the head of the UN has warned of tragic consequences.
Even the best friends of Israel are clear. An assault on Rafah would be a strategic mistake, a political calamity, and a humanitarian nightmare. I appeal to all those with influence over Israel to do everything in their power to help avert even more tragedy.
Well, Israel's move into Rafah comes after Hamas said it would accept a ceasefire proposal put forward by Egypt and Qatar. Israel says the deal falls short of its demands, but is sending a delegation to Cairo for further negotiations. Well, let's get more from our correspondent Martin Lowe, who's in Kerem Shalom on the Israel-Gaza border. Martin, Israel's now closed the Rafah crossing and another border crossing. What more can you tell us?
Rafah crossing was always a key objective of the Israeli Defense Forces. It is the main entry point for humanitarian aid into Gaza, so it is causing concern that it has now been closed. But militarily, it was a necessary objective. The Israeli army says that they needed to take control of that area because they believe that underground there is a network of tunnels that connects Gaza underneath the boundary security fences and all the way into Egypt. Now, the army says that Hamas has been resupplied with weapons and other materials through those underground tunnels, so they had to capture that area. That's why from this location they've been pounding there with artillery for 2 days. Today we've seen helicopters firing rockets, and we can hear heavy caliber machine gun fire from tanks. But it's not all one way. Hamas has fired back 30 rockets at this location today. Earlier we were at a small community when suddenly there was a warning of a rocket attack. Now, the defense system here is automatic, the Israeli Iron Dome, so radar tracks the incoming rocket and triggers a defensive system, but it also flashes an alert to people in the area. You then have 15 seconds to take cover before the missile lands. We were able to get into a very close-by bomb shelter, and after a few moments we came out again, and we could in fact see that a missile had been intercepted in the sky right above us. We could still see smoke and debris from the disintegrating rocket, and we could see a smoke trail where the intercepting missile from the Iron Dome had streaked through the sky. So what this demonstrates is that Hamas is still fighting. They say they will continue to do that to show that they still have military capability.
Well, Martin, we're very glad that you and the team are still safe. What do we know about the ceasefire deal agreed to by Hamas, but tell us why Israel won't accept it?
Well, Israeli negotiators have returned to Cairo, where the mediations are taking place, and they say they will examine exactly what Hamas has accepted. But their first reaction was that Hamas have accepted a deal that wasn't actually on the table. They think Egyptian and Qatari mediators, along with Hamas, had tweaked some of the details to make it acceptable to them. But Israel said it wasn't acceptable to their side. But we know the general framework. It involves a series of short ceasefires during which hostages will be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. It's not one for one. Hamas is demanding 30 prisoners for every Israeli civilian hostage that they release, and 50 prisoners for every Israeli soldier that they let go. But of course the big sticking point remains. Hamas wants this ceasefire to be permanent, to basically signal an end to the fighting. Israel isn't prepared to do that. They say they want to pursue the military operation until their objectives are achieved.
Martin Lowe in Rafah, thank you very much.
Well, our correspondent Akram Al-Satari has a picture from the ground in Rafah.
Well, the situation is extremely catastrophic. East Rafah area has been witnessing very heavy bombardment since last night. People have been moving out of that area. Tens of thousands of people have been moving from the east to the west side of Rafah. Tens of thousands have been moving from the area of Rafah to the area of Khan Yunis. People are frantically grabbing anything they can and moving so that they would be safe, and they would be saving their families from the imminent death that they expect to Rafah. The bombardment has been non-stop. I was on one of the cars when I was moving from one area of Rafah to another. I met an old woman who was crying over the death of her family, her entire family. Only one child was left. And she was talking about the things that they have been seeing. She was talking about the destruction that has been caused. This is one of the cases of loss and bereavement that happened due to that ongoing operation in Gaza. Palestinians are moving now, are hoping they would be saved, but at the very same time, there were some fresh aerial strikes happening in the Gaza North, in Gaza City, in Gaza Central area. So Gaza Strip in general is witnessing an increased level of bombardment, and people in Rafah are bearing the brunt of that spike in the hostilities in Rafah, and they expect much more to happen, and they have already made their choice, made their mind to leave Rafah area towards Khan Yunis or Gaza Central area. So death devastation and loss of hope is chasing the Palestinians and is making their life even harder under this continuous escalation and bombardment.
In a joint statement, the leaders of China and France have called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza to allow for the protection of civilians and the delivery of aid. I spoke to Arnaud Le Gall, a member of the French National Assembly.
I think that France, like China, is in a position of recognizing the Palestinian state. They are both calling for a ceasefire, and I think we could even go further to get this ceasefire in the Middle East. Then, there are also common causes like climate change. It's in the general interest of humanity to fight climate change. The real question is, how do we do it? And look, we also have every interest in fighting inequalities in the world, against the deterioration of security in international relationships, whether on the military level or in terms of food security and security in other areas. It also means knowing how to be honest with each other and that we can cooperate as much as possible.
Protest camps have sprung up on university campuses around the United Kingdom, inspired by student movements in America.
They're asking their schools to divest from any investments supporting Israel. One of the latest camps has been erected at Oxford University. CGTN's Jen Copestake reports.
Around 60 people stayed overnight in these tents on the lawn of the Pitt Rivers Museum at the heart of Oxford University. The majority here are students, but some staff are staying too, and supporters from the local community. They say they will stay as long as it is effective to put pressure on the university to be open about any financial connections they have with Israel and divest from those interests.
One of our big divestment asks is to stop partnering with Barclays. The main reason that we want to divest from Barclays is that Barclays holds millions in assets for the Israeli military. So we would like to ask Oxford University to hold its assets in a different bank, one that is not complicit in Israel's genocide.
Dr. Rebecca Inglis is an intensive care doctor and regularly traveled to Gaza to train junior doctors before October 7th. She says some colleagues have been killed and others have been detained in Israel. Both universities she was teaching at have been destroyed. She is currently studying for a PhD at Oxford.
I really want to support the students in this amazing stand that they're taking. And at the moment, there are also a number of doctors who've been stopped partway through their training, so medical students who've had their training interrupted because of this current conflict. They are desperate to find some solution, some universities internationally who'll be able to take them in. And we're hoping that maybe the UK is going to come and maybe accept some of these medical students and take over now that their studies have been interrupted.
Away from the camps, the UK's Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said that Jewish students must not be intimidated by these new protests. Writing in a newspaper, she said that while freedom of expression is vital to academic communities, the camps could cause a toxic and hostile atmosphere on campuses as students are writing their final exams.
I actually find that as a Jewish student, it is so much more comforting to be surrounded by an environment of people who understand the gravity of the situation. Part of what I want to avoid is excess killing and death remaining to occur. And the truth is that tens of thousands of Israelis agree with me. You know, on the eve of the invasion, there were tens of thousands of Israelis in the streets of Tel Aviv protesting the decision to continue the war. Actually, the closest avenue to returning the hostages to their families is through a ceasefire.
So far, more than 170 staff have signed a statement supporting the students' protest and calling for divestment, and also for support for rebuilding universities for Palestinians. Jen Copestake, CGTN, Oxford.
Vladimir Putin has been sworn in for a fifth term as Russia's president. An inauguration ceremony was held at the Kremlin, marking the start of another 6 years in office. Representatives of most Western nations stayed away, including the US, Canada and EU countries, but France sent its ambassador. Putin said dialogue with the West remained a possibility, but could only happen on equal terms.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has cast his vote as the country's mammoth election reaches the halfway mark. Nearly 1 billion people are eligible to vote in the 7-phase general election, with ballots set to be counted on the 4th of June. Polling suggests Modi and his BJP party are set to comfortably win a rare third term in office against an alliance of more than 24 opposition parties.
Pakistan's military says a suicide bomb attack that killed 5 Chinese engineers was planned in neighboring Afghanistan and carried out by an Afghan national. The incident happened when the convoy the men were traveling in was rammed by a vehicle carrying explosives. The Chinese engineers were in Pakistan to oversee the building of a hydroelectric dam. Afghanistan's Taliban-run administration has not responded to the claims.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come. An ancient technique brought back to life. The artist reviving a lost craft from the days of the Tang dynasty.
Welcome back. And let's return to our top story, President Xi Jinping's visit to France. Christine Kail is the Vice President of Sino-French Cultural Forum and founder of Yishu 8, an art space in Beijing. She attended the state dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron last night, where she met China's president.
The highlights of this Sino-French relationship is based on friendship. I think, my feeling is that China and France have a lot of common points based on culture, based on the way of communicating, the way of living. And, I've been living in China for more than 20 years. And I feel every day in my daily life in Beijing that Chinese and French, they share this love of life, the way of appreciating life that is very unique in our countries.
Yesterday, you attended a state dinner which was hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron. You met the Chinese President Xi Jinping. I wonder if you're able to share any insights or impressions from that meeting.
Oh, I've been so impressed by this meeting, and I feel so honored and so lucky to have had the possibility to have, some sharing and some communication with President Xi. Actually, he paid a lot of attention to what we are doing in terms of exchanges with young artists. And he said to me, we need to focus on young people, because this is only through culture and through young people that we will be able to promote a more peaceful world. Those words touched me a lot.
What impact could his visit specifically have on cultural ties between France and China?
It will reduce all the prejudices, all the fear that we can feel in Europe sometime regarding Chinese development. Culture is a bridge. Culture is the only way to open up to the world in a peaceful attitude. So I think that this time, President Xi come to France, not only to talk about business and political affairs, but also to focus on culture, means that it will open some new fields, new cooperation in the field of culture, which is good, because artists cultivate people. They don't want to make the war. They want peace. They want creation. They don't want destruction. the First Lady, Chinese lady, with Madame Macron, they came together for a visit to Orsay Museum to pay a lot of attention to a lot of paintings, Impressionism, and to meet also some young students. So it means that, you know, those people pay a lot of attention to what does mean art and culture to civilization.
A Chinese artist has brought an ancient bookbinding technique back to life, recreating a lost craft from the days of the Tang dynasty.
Zhang Xiaodong's handmade volumes have been exhibited around the world, winning him international acclaim. Our correspondent, Qi Jie, went to meet him.
A long piece.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is wrapping up his state visit to France. We're watching live feed now from the airport in Tarbes. And French President Emmanuel Macron is holding a seeing off ceremony for the Chinese president. And President Xi Jinping will continue his European tour, and the next stop will take him to Serbia. Following that, he will travel on to Hungary. Now, President Xi spent 2 days in France, meeting with President Emmanuel Macron and other European Union officials, including European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. There was this very important trilateral meeting, and also the two presidents sat down together to discuss a wide range of issues concerning bilateral ties and other issues of international importance. And this is the official departure ceremony at Tarbes Lourdes Pyrenees Airport, and we're bringing you this live from the CGTN headquarters here in Beijing. Now, as we can see, this departure ceremony is taking place later than scheduled, mostly because of the rainy weather there. This is the second day of President Xi Jinping's state visit to France, and President Emmanuel Macron took him to the mountainous Pyrenees region, a place where President Macron holds dear because he spent some childhood time there visiting his grandmother. And the two presidents are now inspecting the Guards of Honor. On Monday, a grand welcome ceremony was being held at Les Invalides. And after that, the two presidents also met at Élysée Palace for bilateral talks. This visit to France is President Xi Jinping's third state visit to the country and the first in 5 years. And this is also his first visit to Europe in 5 years. The much-anticipated visit came as a reciprocal visit to President Macron's visit to China last April. And the two presidents agreed to take bilateral relations to another level. They talked about deepening bilateral cooperation, as well as other issues of common concern, bringing peace, for example, to the conflict going on in the world. And also they're going to deepen their trade ties. And ahead of his visit to France, President Xi Jinping, on this published article in Le Figaro, he said that China and France relationship is a prime example of how two powers could peacefully coexist. And it's also a prime example of how the two countries could achieve win-win cooperation despite being very different in political systems. President Xi Jinping kicked off his 5-day European tour on Monday, and France is the first port of call. And we could see that President Xi Jinping's wife, Madame Peng Liyuan, as well as the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, are also talking, bidding farewell to each other at this official departure ceremony. If you've just joined us, this is our live special coverage of Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to France. And this is the departure ceremony hosted for him by President Emmanuel Macron of France. Live signals now from Tarbes Airport. This is the second day of President Xi's two-day state visit to the country. Trade and investment, cooperation on technology and climate change, green energy were high on their agenda. Now again, President Xi will travel on to Serbia, a Balkan country, and then he will continue on his European trip in Hungary. And they're bidding farewell to officials there, from the embassy. And President Xi Jinping began his state visit to France on Monday morning. President Macron hosted a grand welcome ceremony for him at Les Invalides. And they inspected the Guards of Honor. National anthems of both countries were played. And also on Monday morning, President Xi and President Macron held talks with Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. And this trilateral meeting was seen as a highlight of this visit, as the three leaders discussed investment issues, as well as some of the trade imbalances that the European Union really hopes to bring and really hopes that China would address during President Xi's visit. And after that, the two presidents attended an economic forum, and they've also had a state banquet at Elysee Palace. As you can see right there, Chinese President Xi Jinping with his wife, Madame Peng Liyuan, are now embarking on a trip that will take them to Serbia. And they're bidding farewell to the host, French President Emmanuel Macron and First Lady Brigitte Macron. Live feed now from Tarbes Lourdes Pyrenees Airport, and this is the second stop of President Xi Jinping's visit to France.